sisters, friends, comrades, I bring you greetings and expressions of solidarity to you all. For those that don't know me, I'm referred to in the labor movement as the real Clarence Thomas, because my politics are real. That other guy represents the 1%. First thing I want to say is this. Every generation is called upon to defend its own survival. Let me be a little bit more specific about that. When I was 8 years old, my maternal grandfather, father, and paternal grandfathers took me to the Oakland Auditorium to hear Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. speak in the late 50s. I watched dogs being sicked on young people, Bull Connor at work. I watched this on television as a boy. I'm a son of the civil rights movement. However, when I became of age and attended San Francisco State College, I was part of the longest student strike in American history around the question of open enrollment, ethnic studies, and black studies. I was a member of the Black Panther Party, which was started right here in Oakland, where Occupy Oakland is. I answered the call of my generation, and that is exactly what you young people are doing here today. You are answering the call. You have learned the lessons of the civil rights movement, of the black liberation struggle, of the importance of various political points of view coming together around issues for the common good, the 99%. Your movement has gone beyond protest. It is a movement of resistance. And for those young people here who don't understand what resistance means, I'm going to tell you what it means. It means that you organize and you mobilize in your own name to fight for freedom. You have reclaimed the people's space. This is no longer Franco Gawa Plaza. This is Oscar Grant Plaza. You are demonstrating courage all around the world. You are standing up and reminding all of us what's necessary. I want you to do something. Look to your left, to the person sitting next to you. Look to the right. That is your Superman and Superwoman. These are the people that you have to rely upon to make change. Everything starts from an idea. Just 2 nights ago, we had a delegation from the Occupy Oakland movement to come to Local 10 to address several hundred members of our union to express solidarity. Just last night, we had brothers from Longview, Washington, who are fighting the face of Wall Street in the workplace, Bungie and the EGT, who's attempting to undermine and rupture the ILWU jurisdiction. They spoke here last night. This is about deepening the roots, spreading the wings of this movement to include workers, students, not only organized labor, but also unorganized labor, the unemployed, blacks, whites, straight, gay, lesbian, environmentalists. This is about a people's movement and a people's agenda. I call upon all of labor to stop the eviction of the Occupy Oakland. Labor needs to stop the eviction of Occupy Oakland. Labor needs to stop the eviction of Occupy Oakland. Now I've got a 1-hour speech and 3 minutes to give it, so I got to wrap it up. But let me me say this. There's a slogan that I've coined, and I think that you would agree. We need to take it to the corporate state, let the 1% take the weight. We need to take it to the corporate state and let the 1% take the weight. Take it to the corporate state, let the 1% take the weight. An injury to all is the injury to one is the injury to all. Thank you very much. Realize in your own name to fight for freedom. You have reclaimed the people's space.
I just want to let you know that we have 4 first aid stations that we are monitoring at the Occupy, at Occupy New York, at Wall Street, Occupy DC, San Francisco, and LA, and we're opening 2 more today in Chicago and Detroit to provide first aid for the Occupy people. Thank you. And I just want to let you know that we are, as nurses, really tired of seeing patients who are horrifically affected by this economic crisis. We see patients who are unable to afford their medications, patients who can't stay in the hospital as long as they should be staying in the hospital because they can't afford the co-pays. This economic crisis has devastated our communities, and we are here to stand up, along with the 99%, being part of that 99%, to stand up with that 99% and to stand with everybody. We work for, in general, corporations, and it is time that all of us remind the corporations about where their interests lie, and it's with the 99%. So I just want to thank all of you for being here and for standing up, and to let you know that we will stand with you and we will provide support, and as long as it takes to get this. The last thing I wanted to mention is we're also supporting a transaction tax to tax Wall Street. The nurses are putting forward a transaction tax. And we're going to have an event on November 3rd to stand up. This is in Washington, D.C., also in San Francisco, to support that transaction tax so that we can tax Wall Street and have them pay back some of that money that they've taken from us, and that so we can rebuild, create jobs, and provide health care for people that we all deserve. So.
Jobs, not profits?
Yeah.
It means that we're looking for economic equality rather than doing grossly unethical. I work for CVE.
What does that do?
I provide jobs for people with disabilities.
And what's happening with the disabled in California today?
Nasty. I'm seeing a lot of people on my caseload who've been out of jobs for like 20 years. Their social services are just going away, melting away like the icebergs, if you will.
People represent me. I'm one of those people who lost their job. Bank is trying to hold me to a house for market value, and it's only worth half. So all of the people that have been inconvenienced, sleeping out here all night while I'm working, they speak for me. So I came out here to support them today.
Students around, college students around for the rest of their lives. They're taking people's homes away, and their alternative is starting to offer now. They're talking about a voluntary plan where if you want your home, stay in your home, sure, provided you give us recourse to take everything else that you got. In education, they're privatizing schools, they're downsizing it, and they're shutting it down. 8 years ago, when the state took over the Oakland Unified School District, there were 54,000 students, 55,000. There are now 37,000. It lost a third of its students. They quadrupled the number of students in charter schools. They tripled the debt. They came in to say, we have to take over. The state has to take over because you're $37 million in deficit. They tripled it to $110 million while they were shutting down and closing down education, chasing out a third of the students. How did they do that? Because they have twice the outsourcing to private contractors and twice the administrative overhead of the average school district in the state. So what did they do with the money? They took that $110 million, they securitized it, they turned it over to banks who sold it off as bonds. We cannot default on that according to the law, because they wrote into the law that even if you default, you still owe it to the banks. Now what are they doing? They're talking about closing 5 elementary schools, taking 7 small high schools and turning them into quote-unquote 2 high-quality high schools. I taught at Castlemont High School, and we warned when they broke it up into small schools, you're going to make it worse, and then 10 years from now, you'll turn around and put the schools back together and make it worse again after shutting down electives, closing libraries, chasing students away. They closed the library at Castlemont 8 years ago. They fired the librarian. Now, they're putting it back together. No library there. They closed down many of the middle school libraries. Now, what can we do about this? Well, we can start by saying schools should not be vacant. Schools should be occupied. We should not allow these schools to be shut down. Instead, we should start looking at our power and what we've done here and talk about occupying schools. We should do the same thing with libraries. They're talking about shutting down libraries, and the only way they keep them open is by hacking things like Kaiser Auditorium over to developers. Libraries are for the people. We need to keep the libraries open. We need to occupy the libraries. And we have to break the power of these big banks and financiers around here who do nothing for us but rip off society and are kicking the can down the road till they lead us over the cliff. We have to take all this away from them. We can start here now by occupying the schools and the libraries and not letting them shut them down. Thank you.
Community colleges is that the number of sections and the number of counselors keeps going down, down, down. Laney is going to cut about 130 sections for the spring, including, I teach basic skills. I'm hearing that my program is about to go.
And I'm a proud member of the industrial workers of the world. And I want to start off by saying that I will take the pledge that if this occupation is closed down, that on the very next night or any other night that the call is sent out, I will be here to put my freedom and my body on the line along with the rest of you other comrades. And I hope every single one of you, as well as every one of the speakers, will make that pledge also. Of course, there's been some conflicts here, but what I've seen, they're all being worked out within the occupation itself. In my own neighborhood in the last year or so, there must have been at least a dozen cases of people being held up at gunpoint. So the problems that I see here are far less than what I see elsewhere. And we should remember during the Oakland General Strike of 1946 that the chief of police himself had to admit that crime came to a complete halt during the days of that general strike. The most recent poll that's just out in today's paper, it shows that 37% of Americans support the occupation movement. And why do they support that movement? Let's just look at the situation. They know, they may not know the statistics, but they see what's happening. They see the top 1% that has $22 trillion and the top 5% that has $39 trillion in wealth. At the same time, we know about the 1.5 billion people worldwide, that's 25% of the world population, that's living on $1 a day or less. They're not even living, or just barely living. We know about the 15 million children who starve to death all around the world every year. Do you know how much it would cost to solve the world's food and sanitation problems? A mere $13 billion. That is to say, if you took that top 5% and took just $3,000, probably half of what they spend when they go out at night, took just $3,000 a piece from every single one of them, that money would solve the world's food and sanitation problems. And that shows how those people, how they got that money and who they really are. That the sitting back, it's like if you were an expert swimmer sitting on a beach watching a little child drown just 10 feet offshore, and you couldn't be bothered to get up off of your chair and go out and save that little child. that is that top 1% and that top 5%, that is their mentality. Just look at, there's been a lot in the news recently about Steve Jobs. How did he get his wealth? It's come out that the new 4G iPhone that sells for over $600, that it's something like $9 per phone that goes to the labor. He's got factories in China where there's been shown to be children 15 years old and younger working over 60 hours a week. Apple incidentally recommends that no children of that age in China should be working for more than 60 hours a week. That's how kind-hearted they are.
Earn your iPhone!
Now this movement has been criticized for a lack of demands, but I think we all want an end of corporate dictatorship over our world. And I can tell you some other things that bring me here, what I want. I want a decent job for everybody at a $20 an hour minimum wage and a $5 an hour raise for all workers who are making over $20 an hour. I want to see an end to all foreclosures and decent and affordable housing for all. I want to see all those CEOs that are responsible for corporate pollution and corporate swindling, they're the ones who should be in jail. Along with the Johannes Meserlis and others of his type. And we want to see an end to the death penalty. And we want to support the Pelican Bay hunger strikers and to free Bradley Manning and all the other political prisoners in this country. We want an end to U.S. military intervention all around the world. And a real serious development of alternate energy and to reverse the global warming, which is one of the greatest threats to the future generations. It's one of the main reasons that I'm out here, for my grandchildren and everybody else's grandchildren. And the fact is, we know that capital is privately owned, that the big banks and the big corporations, they're privately owned and nothing gets produced or distributed unless it's going to lead to a profit for that top 5%. And you can't control what you don't own. And these people, they are out of control, they've never been under control, and it's impossible to control them. We need to take ownership for ourselves. We need the public ownership of the banks and the top corporations, and then we will plan what gets produced and how it's distributed. We as working class people. This movement is only starting. I was looking in the news. There's 650 cities all around the world that are being occupied. And just as we stand here today, the city of Lahore, Pakistan, they're setting up an anti-capitalist, anti-feudal occupation camp in Lahore, Pakistan. And where is the corporate media there? Every time some suicide bomber kills him or herself and a dozen people or so standing around them, it's all over the news. Where's the news about that anti-capitalist occupation in Lahore? And then there's, of course, all the strikes, from the Greek general strike to the strike of the warehouse workers up there in Longview, Washington, who have occupied there, who have taken over the workplace there. And we know that we need stronger and more militant unions. Unions that go back to the traditions of the occupation, which we here, right here and now, are reestablishing. And I want to say something else. We know that the Republicrats are our enemies. And that really it's just the corporations own one political party that has two different faces. And there's one wing of one of those faces, the so-called progressive wing of the Democrats. All they are a tiny and impotent minority that will never be able to influence anything. They are merely the bait for the trap. And we know that in the workplace, when the workers unite and organize to fight the boss, that's what forming a union is. And now we're going beyond that. We're seeking to organize a wider layer of working class people, the workers and the unemployed, the house husbands and housewives along with the wage workers. the retirees and the students, those who are about to lose their home, along with those who have no homes. And we are organizing to fight in the streets and in the communities, in the schools and in the workplaces. Everywhere where we exist, that's where we're organizing to fight. And this is just the beginning of the struggle. You know, there's that comment by that admiral during the Revolutionary War. He was in a naval battle and he was asked to surrender. And he said, "Surrender?" He said, "Sir, we have just begun to fight." And our fight here is just beginning. We know that. And as any struggle, there's always ups and downs in that struggle. And what we need, just as in the workplace you need the unions, we need an organization that unites the broad mass of working class people in the workplace and outside, as I was saying. This may be a bit controversial what I'm about to say, but this is a free speech zone, and this is my own view, is that broad organization is a mass working class people's party. That's what I see it. To provide the alternative to the Republicrats. And so I just say to you this, I'm kind of running over my time here, that what we're doing, this is just the beginning of the struggle to take back what's ours and to bring down this vicious, brutal, capitalist system, the same system that murdered Oscar Grant and lynched Troy Davis. That's the system that we're going to bring to an end and create a system based on our needs. So that's my conclusion. And just to end it, I just have to say, victory to the occupation movement, victory to the world's working class people. We together can conquer the world.
I mean, I think we've seen over the past few years very clearly that both the Democrats and Republicans are capitalist parties, but we also see that it's not that there's no difference between them. There's maybe a minor difference in strategy. So the Republicans have that nut wing, for example, which has, you know, been pushing more egregiously than the Democrats. They both are aimed at the world going to hell in a handbasket. Their question is over how fast to go and over pace. And they're both beholden to the big banks and finance, and it's real clear that there was a $16 trillion bailout. There's God knows how much money in a toxic hole that gets bigger all the time, because the more austerity they do, the more everyone, people, nations, mortgagees, fall into debt. The deeper that debt becomes, the more austerity they do and the deeper in the hole we get. Who knows? It's not going to end. And the banks could settle it by saying, we are going to accept the losses for what happened in 2008, and we'll accept the losses now. But they won't do it. So they're kicking the can down the road. In Europe, it's almost over the edge. And they'll pull everyone with it. If the European banks go under, Morgan Stanley has billions of dollars of indebtedness to the French and German banks. They'll go under, there'll be a chain reaction. We have to do is say, there's no reason to have this private banking and finance system. What do they contribute? What do they contribute to the well-being of people? We need to say, we need to reorganize society, starting with finance, and put it in our hands. We decide what gets invested, how it gets invested. Instead of giving the money into a bottomless hole, which goes into huge bonuses for bankers and just pulls everybody further down, we need to say people should be staying in their homes, and the mortgages should be basically immediately readjusted down to the market values, and then we should have a society where everyone has a home, everyone has a job, where everybody has a decent education, everyone has health care. We're going the opposite direction. I'm reading an article right now on how the nationalized health service in Britain has really already been privatized in all but name. They're going the opposite direction of what people need. So I think it's really important. Now, when we talked 3 years ago, Obama talked about hope and yes we can and change we can believe in. This here is the change we can believe in. This here is the hope. The hope is us. Us depending on and building ourselves. Not depending on condescending saviors, not depending on the Democratic politicians and Republican politicians just beholden to capitalist parties. We can build it ourselves, and that's what we can see. And I think if people watch the videos you're taking today, they'll see exactly what I'm talking about. In 2003, the state of California took over the Oakland Unified School District, ostensibly because it was $37 million in deficit. In the next 7 years, they tripled that to $110 million. They took that debt and they gave it to the California Infrastructure Bank, which then hired Bank of America as the selling agent and turned it into securities. They sold it off as bonds. The regulations, the law that enabled the California Infrastructure Bank says that a school district cannot rid itself of that debt even if it goes bankrupt. That debt stays with it forever. So they tripled the debt. While they tripled the debt, they shrunk the school district. It went from 55,000 students to 37,000 students. They closed down schools, they shut down electives, they closed almost every library in middle schools and several high schools, including Castlemont, where I taught for that entire period. Where did the money go? How did they triple the debt? Well, they had over $80 million a year in outsourced contract. Per capita, that was about double the average for a school district in the state. They had double the average administrative overhead in the state. In 2005-2006, the state audit showed they had 78 excess administrators that year. What did the state do? They're fining the school district $1.3 million for having excess administrators. Who was running the school district? The state. This is the world's biggest scam. They should be paying us back in perpetuity. They should be building new schools, increasing teacher salaries, providing the kind of resources kids need. Instead, it's
the Injunction Coalition here in Oakland. We've been all up in City Hall for the past 2 years. Why? Because there's an occupation in our communities by the police and security forces of this U.S. government in Oakland. Instead of an occupation here to bring our resources back to our communities, we have all of our money being spent on policing and surveillance in our communities, whether it be migrant communities, whether it be black and brown youth who don't want to be in school because the education is not sufficient for what they want. So right here in Oakland, we have injunctions which are trying to push black and brown youth out of their communities. They are targeting them based upon their race, based upon their culture. And where are they trying to put them? They're trying to put them in the billion-dollar industry and state initiative called the prison system. And right there in the prison system, we have the same gang validation system that is going on right here in the streets of Oakland, that is only pushing more black and brown youth into a system that does not give them any education or any rehabilitation. And so we have CDCR, the California Department of Corrections, which is right down the street in the state of California building and in Sacramento, pushing these horrible policies which the prison population, the most radical and politically organized prisoners, resist and try and educate each other, where there is a vacuum of education and rehabilitation. And what does the state do with those prisoners? They put them in solitary confinement. Much like the same conditions on the street here in Oakland. If you're in an injunction, you can't interact with any other people on the injunction.
Start here.